Welcome to the Policy Committee meeting, November 17th, 2020. Verification of the meeting being properly posted. Lynn?
Yes, we have been.
Properly posted, thank you. And now would be the time for opportunity for public comment, but we see none in the room. Is nobody in the other room, is there, Lynn?
No.
Okay. And bright lights we're passing on tonight. We do have a number of action items this evening and different levels of that program we have. But before that, we have the approval of the minutes for our previous meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Corey,
I second the motion.
seconded by Diane. Any questions or comments on the minutes, changes?
No.
Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. 3-0, Lynn. Okay, we have no action items in what we call the legal grouping. And we have none in the new grouping. We have a number of them in the action item in the recommended approval at the committee to move on to the full board for final approval. So I think we have about a dozen of those, yes. So if you are ready, we will start going through those. Okay. If I can remember how to make this work. 2340 field trips. And we had a discussion at T&L the other night about this, and it's been something we've been on and off to talking about. Do you want to lead the way on this one, Joe?
Yeah, so there was some discussion at the Teaching and Learning Committee about what type of field trip gets approved at the administrative level versus what type of field trip gets approved at the committee level. Jody Landish and the Teaching and Learning team did some research, and most school districts do not bring all field trip type overnight field trips to the board for approval. They will approve those administratively, and then they'll bring more substantial field trips to the board or to the committee for approval. And so, if you go down, I think it's about the third. If you're using your iPad, it's the third page of the policy, right in the middle. The addition to this policy, any in-state travel that is less than $250 per student, and all WIAA athletic and club competitions will be reviewed by district administration in collaboration with the school administration. So that's where the approval level will be at for anything that is less than $250 or is a progression in competition. Any out-of-state or international travel, as well as any in-state travel that costs more than $250, will be made to the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, and then will be submitted to the Teaching and Learning Committee. So that's what the benchmark that we try to distinguish. We use $250 as a benchmark. I'm not saying that $250 is not a lot of money, but it's not the $3,000, $4,000, even $1,000, multiple night trip somewhere. And we thought that administrative discretion. There was a lot of discussion at the Teaching and Learning Committee about what is a level of equity, I would say, for trips. So making sure the kids had access to trips. We feel that our schools do a pretty good job of providing very similar opportunities to students. And then, again, knowing that anything is going to be big, anything that's going to require a lot of fundraising would come to the board. And then if you look through this policy, we talk about 18 months in advance for the Teaching and Learning Committee. One of the issues that we used to have was fundraising would start before the field trip was approved. And it tied the hands of the committee to say no, because in some instances kids had already fundraised for the entire trip. So minor change to the policy, but we think it's going to make it a lot more operational in the schools. Not that the committee doesn't want to know about the team going to the state football championship or basketball championship or whatever it might be, but we don't believe that that's anything that the committee would want to even weigh in on, because how would you say no to that?
Any, Diane?
I've been involved in the overnight field trips like my entire teaching career as an FBLA advisor and taking kids to state and national competition across the country. I think the 250 is a reasonable number because if it's under that amount, again, you can fundraise for that and it's doable. But when it gets to be beyond that and you're talking airline transportation and hotel for multiple nights and things like that, we really do need the support that's been built into this policy to allow all kids to be able to experience those opportunities in competition.
Yeah, I mean, we were seeing some international travel that was, $4,000 or $5,000, and I don't think that anybody wants to say yes to that without giving serious thought to how our kids going to pay for it, and can everybody access it if appropriate.
And international or out of state requires to come to the board anyway, right?
Correct. That comes to committee. Yep.
So it's really just the local stuff at 250 and under, or those that we have all the time anyway, which are the competitive events.
Yep. Those would be the competitive events would be taken out.
Yeah,
The
the
international travel and the band trip to Florida would come to the board.
yeah. Diane?
Is there any way that those can still be communicated to teaching and learning, that these are all happening without having to go through the 20-page packet and the approval process that we have had recently?
I could certainly bring that back to Jody, and Greg Dietz is the chair, to see if they would want that type of update there. We do, if the approval is at the administrative level, we would certainly have record of who is going where. Whether they would want it agendized or not, is something that they could certainly discuss.
Just be a report, like an information item rather than anything that'd be subject to discussion or to vote, debate, et cetera. But I think it'd just be nice to know which kids did qualify to go to state, which teams had that opportunity.
Well, if you're talking about the competitive, I have trouble with the competitive events and so on. It'd be nice to know, but every little, you didn't mean every little trip that's under $250, did you?
No, I'm just thinking the more the competition kind of thing.
okay.
Like how many students are able to go on, in music or in sports or in FBLA or DECA, et cetera. I think just an awareness of that opportunity.
That would be nice. But
And it used to be on the report card, like how many kids are involved in extracurricular activities, and like that's now taken off too. So it's like this would be at least one way for the board to be able to have at least an insight into those wonderful opportunities that are just invaluable for kids' learning experiences.
Corey?
Yeah, it's fine. I agree with it. Just a suggestion, and it's not to change this, but there's actually a debate over what the word will means. So what we've been doing is saying shall or must. It's overly particular, but
Where is this?
in the green where it says club competitions will be reviewed by the district. I'm not suggesting a change to this. at all.
No. That's consistent with. That's consistent. We've used in policy the language shall or may as the delineating. So
Okay.
any state travel that costs less than $250 shall be reviewed by district administration. Any out-of-state or international travel, as well as any in-state travel that costs more, shall be submitted to the Teaching and Learning Committee. So we will get rid of the word.
This is consistent then?
This would be consistent with the policy. 3-4 years ago, when we went through all the policy review, we had a big discussion around shall and may, I think, which may gave discretion, shall was you will.
Will
do
is
it.
the more solid one.
Shall was the more solid one.
Shall is the more solid one.
Yep,
Okay.
I think so.
In lawyers or,
Yeah.
because we're overly particular now, use must.
Must, okay.
Okay.
I got it.
Is there a motion on this one? Diane?
I move to accept the recommended changes to policy 2340, field trips and other school district-sponsored trips.
I'll second.
Seconded by Corey. Further questions or discussion on this item?
No, sir.
None? All in favor of approving it, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 3-0 then.
Thank you.
And that brings us 2700.01, school performance and accountability reports.
So the old model of school accountability reports were massive one-time-a-year data submissions to the state. That has since changed, and so that data gets updated as the year goes forward. You still have to have your quote-unquote accountability report, but it's not submitted in its old formal fashion. It's for instance, attendance rates are updated daily. scores are updated differently. So we then have the option in green, page 1 of the policy, per the DPI, the district may use links to the WISE Dash public portal. WISE Dash is the state system that houses all of that data. Any citizen can go ahead and click on WISE Dash and look up how school districts are doing. So we have linked that now to our website for the ease of our families. And then the report will include the following. They eliminated C and D from the report. That's based off of state reporting. So you can see items A, B, E, F, G, H will continue in that accountability report. And then finally, the change, a copy of each school's accountability report shall be provided to the parent of each student enrolled in or attending the school, so that this, again, has been part of statute for a while, so we're just updating our policy to reflect it. And again, that can be done electronically. That school report is linked electronically.
So that's how it's reported, the reported, to
Correct. I mean,
parents, each enrolled student type of thing, just electronically?
Electronically shared with parents, yep.
Okay, no big surprises in that one, and the two things that were eliminated, as we said, we no longer need because they are already available. And Lynn, you recorrect the alphabet when you get those two out of there, right?
Yes, that's something I can't
technical
change
correction until it's
because,
approved.
yeah, I technically don't make the changes. Neola does.
Okay,
That's
fine.
officially.
It's
So
just, it will happen. That's
yes,
all I wanted to be
it's
sure
part
of.
of the process.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, Diane.
I was just referenced a few seconds ago the idea that they're getting rid of the percentage of students participating in extracurricular and community activities, and in AP classes. I was just wondering why.
Don't have a good reason why. It was just it was the recommended change. It's it's data that they are no longer collecting.
But I still think that that's a very positive statement that we can make as a school district about
Sure.
how many students we have participating in community events, how many students are taking AP classes, et cetera.
We do have that as part of our district goals. If you look at our AP percentage or participation from the district goals, that is information that we retain. And so it's local information for us. But again, this wasn't something that was being pulled by the state any longer.
Talking about post-secondary part?
The post-secondary, we have that post-secondary component to our district goals, and we'll still maintain that. Again, this is just for the school accountability report that the DPI pulls.
Okay, Corey?
And DPI isn't collecting that information, so it doesn't make sense to even send it to them? But we're
Correct, yeah, they
publishing
don't,
it.
it's not part of the uploads anymore.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Okay. Somebody move in favor of, I lost my number,
Sure. Thank you.
2700.01.
I will move to,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'll move to approve the changes to policy number 2700.01 as presented.
I second it.
Other questions or discussion?
No, sir.
Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, okay, and none? 3-0. Tongue-tied there. Lynn, it's 3-0.
Thank you.
Okay, now I got to bring this back up. 3120.04, employment of substitutes. Not too sure why this one even came to be, but it did.
Yeah, so the addition of, if you look in the second paragraph, to temporarily fill new positions, we wouldn't want to hire a substitute to permanently fill a new position. So for instance, if a third grade class had a lot of enrollment and we had to add a teacher and we employed somebody in September because of that addition, that would not necessarily be considered it would be a full-time position. It would not be a renewing type contract there. So it would be a temporary fill for that position. In this case of a substitute, it would be a temporary fill until the position could be filled permanently. So that's why we added the to temporarily fill the new positions.
Just kind of a protection.
Right, yeah. And substitutes are not full-time renewing type positions. They're people who fill a gap for us if should somebody be out. And then the other thing that changed there, what was struck was as the superintendent deems appropriate, and then it's permitted by law. So we want to make sure that, the use of substitutes is in concert with what the law allows us to do for substitute staff, particular to their certification. You do need to have a sub license in order to perform sub duties, and that means you have the qualifications to get that license.
Struck the word competitive in compensation, too.
Correct. Sub rates are sub rates. I mean,
Okay.
we want to make sure that
really
we're
care.
compensating people, but the idea of competitive compensation, I mean, it's a substitute. There's a daily rate
yeah.
set for substitute teachers. In some instances, you may have to, negotiate with somebody who's got a unique skill set, but you don't need to be competitive per se. You want to be competitive, but competitive is an unnecessary word.
I get it.
Yeah, just
Is that a Neola
I'm sorry, it just opens you
recommendation?
up to problems too.
To get rid of the word competitive is a Neola recommendation?
This is the Neola recommendation, correct?
Okay.
Not as if we don't want to offer competitive compensation, but it's just unnecessary, as Mr.
Yeah,
Baumgart
it's not
said.
necessary to be there, yeah.
And in our sub rate, our daily sub rate is competitive for other school districts around a daily sub rate. That's the
We
that's the
stay that
piece
way,
for
yeah.
for all folks. But
Okay, that's 3120.04. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll move to approve the changes to policy number 3120.04 is presented.
Second the motion.
Seconded by Diane. Further questions?
No.
Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 3-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
And that moves us back here to 3120.10, job sharing. Joel?
yeah, so we've got a history of allowing job shares in the district. It's benefited us, to some degree in some areas, but where it makes sense. So the idea of making sure that it's in the best interest considering the educational program. So it may, be in our benefit just using, say, like a high school English class where you need 8 sections of English covered. You may take 2 part-time teachers and cover one to cover the AM session, one to cover the PM session, for instance. And then they would split what is otherwise then that full-time FTE to cover that. Sometimes we run into instances where, people only want part-time work, and 2 teachers in the same license area want part-time work and they can fill a full-time position. Again, it might make sense. There may be situations where we would not think that that's favorable for us. In some cases, like a special education teacher who's got a unique caseload of students that they need to work with and serve all day long, where that you need to have a level of consistency, we may not then allow it because it doesn't benefit the program. So that's the first change. The other part of it is that we would look at limiting it to 2 teachers sharing 1 full-time position, instead of, 3 teachers splitting it a third, or 4 teachers a quarter. So really trying to create some uniformity to job share positions.
And I think I don't, not the current modern way of looking at things, but what it was before the pandemic, this made a lot of sense to a lot of people that they could manage their careers in pieces, maybe rather than be locked into a full-time position or whatever is best for that household.
Yep.
So, and we've done this. I mean, this is not a new thing.
This
but
would be nothing new
but
for
it's
us.
clear here, yeah. Questions on this one, Diane?
No, I would just compliment the district that even if it exceeds the cost of 1 full-time person, if it's a good positive for the school district, a positive for the 2 staff
Sure.
people, it doesn't have to be, lower than like 1 full-time position per se. So
Right.
I'd make a motion to approve the revisions to policy 3120.10 on job sharing as presented.
I'll second.
Seconded by Corey. Further questions?
No.
Seeing none, all in favor of accepting 3120.10 as changed or presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 3-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Use of tobacco and nicotine by professional staff.
So this policy for both 3215 and I believe the numbering is 4215.
Yeah.
I have to
Correct.
look for both professional and support staff. Talks about the prohibition of using tobacco or promoting tobacco products on our district property. There are some exceptions to that. There are, for instance, like in a health curriculum, you may want to have cigarette, chewing tobacco, vape products, on display for students so that they understand what they are for an educational purpose. We don't want that to be a violation of the policy. We don't want somebody who's using a nicotine patch who needs to do that to quit smoking. We don't want that to be considered a violation. We don't want it to be as part of instruction around Native American and American Indian communities where that could be part of the cultural ceremonies. We don't want that to be considered a prohibition of it. But we do want to make sure that it's not taken lightly on our campus because we do understand that there are, substantial health issues as it's associated with nicotine products. So I do believe that there was just a recent case where teenagers are suing Juul because the product was attractive to them, but it's been, considered to be addictive. So this is essentially a rewrite of what the old policy was. You can see on the bottom that the language in red was struck. And this is just an intention to be more intentional about discussing the prohibition on campus. And
It is very thorough. Diane?
Just a comment, this is the most red and green I think I've seen in any policy change. And going back to 2011, when their big concern was secondhand smoke, and there have been a lot of changes in the last 9 years that I think that this is important to make this update.
Yeah.
And we continue, if you think about our discipline policies, the discussions we've had around those the past few years, we've had more and more conversations around vaping and the electronic cigarettes and everything like that. And we just want to put ourselves in a position where we're saying that this is not at all acceptable on our grounds. We also want to be clear, though, too, that, if somebody's grandfather or father has a Camel T-shirt on when they go to a football game or something like that, we're not causing issue with that either. We're not going to tell somebody to leave our property because of what's on their T-shirt. This really focuses on our staff, on our campus, and what they're engaged in.
It focuses only on staff on
Correct.
campus, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
Doesn't talk about what the community is wearing.
Right.
And it's not trying to dictate what the community's behavior is. It's really focusing on what we can control on our grounds.
Right. Thank you.
Would it be
Diane?
appropriate to make the approval of 3215 and 4215 like together?
Certainly
We
could. yes.
can. I think the wording is the same.
It's the same. Yep.
Is professional staff versus
Yeah,
support staff?
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you. I was just going to go to 4215, but that's fine if you want to do it. though.
If it is appropriate,
Yeah.
I'd recommend that we approve the revisions to policy 3215 on the use of tobacco and nicotine by professional staff and the revisions to policy 4215, use of tobacco and nicotine by support staff as presented.
Thank you.
Just to be overly particular, I think we have to move and not recommend.
What?
I think we have to make a motion and not recommend.
Gee, I would,
Move for approval?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
Yep,
thank you. I didn't
that's what I
catch
meant.
it.
Okay. I'll second.
Seconding?
Yes, sir.
Any further questions? Thank you for that adjustment. All in favor of approving 32 and 15 and 4215, please say aye.
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 3-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
Okay, and that brings us to 3362.01. I have another duplicate on that one, too.
Correct.
See, these there. Okay. Threatening behavior towards staff members. Joe?
Yep. So just again, we want to make sure that we maintain, a safe work environment for all. Support staff, professional staff. I think it's important to know that threatening behavior consists of any words or deeds that intimidate or are intended to intimidate a staff member or are reasonably likely to cause concern for his or her physical and or psychological well-being, strictly forbidden. Such actions by any student, parent, visitor, staff member, board member, contractor, or agent of the board is prohibited, and the board authorizes appropriate corrective action and remedial action, including disciplinary action where appropriate, referral to law enforcement, or pursuit of other remedies, including injunctive relief if appropriate. The policy should be read consistent with and in conjunction with school safety and the mandatory reporting of threats of violence in policy 8462.01, threats of violence. Again, this is in place to make sure that people understand that just because it happens in a school setting or in the district setting, that it doesn't give you any sort of relief from law enforcement being involved if your behavior was such that it warrants it. It's also to get rid of intimidating behavior, threatening behavior that can happen towards a staff member, both professional or support in the district.
Just a reminder that this is a duplicated one also. Diane?
Just a point of clarification, who would fit in the category of the agent of the board?
Anybody who's contracted by the board. So, we have contractors listed there, but I'm trying to think of a good example of agent of the board. Say, for instance, that the board forms an ad hoc committee to study curriculum material, which is something that we do for our complaint process over instructional materials. The board forms a committee to review that, and a member on that committee becomes intimidating and threatening to others. That person then would fall into line with this. They're just not a random citizen. So they would then at that point would be acting as an agent of the board.
Dan?
So I'm just looking at student, parent, visitor, staff member, et cetera. No, there's nothing speaking to administration being potentially the person doing the threatening behavior?
We are staff members.
So just in that context.
And agents of the board. I
Okay,
mean,
so
yeah.
in the, between staff and that,
Right.
that's where administration would fit? Okay.
Correct, yep.
Corey?
Weird question is, does this apply from people to the board? And I would honestly hope that it doesn't, because I think people, public comment, they will try to do these things. So like, if you don't do this, this is going to happen.
Sure.
Okay.
There are other remedies for a public official, and we'd have to look at the, what would be the bylaws, if we wanted to build that in. I think the bylaw where there's public comment for the board, we'd have to look into it. Talks about the public having to maintain a level of decorum. So I think that there's a certain level of protection there, but because you are elected officials, there's kind of less protection for you as far as somebody coming in and making statements. Now, if you felt threatened, you certainly could call the police, and we as an organization can have police present at our meetings and such, but
No, I greatly prefer let them rip, as
Yeah.
long as it doesn't violate the law.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay.
Okay.
It's hopefully not directed at me.
That was 3362.01 and 4362.01. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll move to approve the changes as presented to policies 3362.01 and policy number 4362.01 as both were presented.
Second.
Seconded by Diane. Any further questions?
No.
Seeing none. All in favor of approving these two policies, please say aye.
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 Opposed? 3-0, Len.
Thank you.
Okay, caught up here. $41.30.
Yep, 4130 is assignment and transfer for support staff. The addition to this is subject to and consistent with any applicable terms of the employee handbook. We do have an employee handbook for support staff, and we wanted to make sure that that was reflected in policy.
So that's all we're really doing is letting them know that that's where it is.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Anything on 4130?
No.
Okay. Approval for, go ahead.
I move to approve the revisions to policy 4130, assignment and transfer as presented.
I'll second.
Further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? None? 3-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. 7230, gifts and grants. This one got a little bit more. Let's see. Okay.
Policy adds non-discrimination language in the second, I believe it's the second paragraph, where it talks about if you're going to accept donations, if you're going to accept gifts, you can't discriminate as to, who comes in for the gift. The other part, the next change, talks about, and it's been our practice, if it's $500 or more, it goes to the board for approval. If it's less than $500, the superintendent can accept it. It's now captured in policy. And then the superintendent may approve grants on behalf of the board. And so every year we get, the district is awarded grants for a number of things. For instance, the school safety grant, that had Todd's signature on it, that didn't have the board's signature on it. The mental health grant from DPI, Todd accepted that grant on our behalf when we were awarded it. So it's it's a function of the superintendent to get those things that are helping us on a day-to-day basis. And then any equipment purchased by a parent organization used for the school with a value of $1,000 or more shall be submitted to the superintendent for approval. If you remember a few years back, there was some parents took it upon themselves to try to do a GoFundMe to air condition Blair when Blair was open as an elementary school, and that was unbeknownst to the administration. So, so these things need then to get approval by the superintendent or his or her designee in order to address that. So,
And this is about the school district of Waukesha, not the Education Foundation. I
correct.
just want
This
to
is
be
just
clear
the
on
school
it.
district of Waukesha. Correct. Sometimes gifts are very generous and they're very valuable, but when you look at the kind of the cost of ownership over some of those gifts, in the long run, you end up spending more money on what was donated to you than.
Sure.
And I think that's where the green word now is approval versus acceptance.
Yep.
So you really, it's not just a matter of accepting the gift, but approving it because of the potential costs or liability or whatever, there might be reasons to not want to approve it.
Because there are situations like, I
Yeah,
don't want to do that.
right.
Okay, anything else on this one? Seeking a motion then?
I'll move to approve the revisions to policy number 7230 as presented.
Second the motion?
Seconded by Diane. Any further questions?
No.
Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? 3-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
8710 insurance.
Yeah, this is a recommended change. You can see what our old language was. Insurance for a given coverage shall be obtained at the lowest possible cost. That language was struck from the policy. Per recommendation from Darren, this gets us in line a little bit with what our insurance company is asking of us, which is why we have the contractors section in there, that the board will require contractors to have enough insurance coverage to cover the project, and then also to list the district as insured on their insurance, and then also to cover the cost of bonds for projects. And so, very appropriate to what we've been doing the last couple of years with our work at our schools, where the work needs to be bonded, where we need to be covered, where the construction company also needs to be covered in the work.
So I gather from that if I were to visit one of the schools where there is a contractor working and I would be injured in some way, they would be included I would be included in their insurance.
Correct. They would be, and then if anybody from our staff, I believe if I understand this correctly, if anybody from our staff then were injured as a result of their actions, their insurance company would cover
Right.
it because we are also listed as insured on the policy.
Okay, that's what I was gathering from this, and I appreciate that.
Darren did work
Aspect.
with our insurance company on this
Sorry?
addition.
Oh. Dan?
In this particular policy, the first sentence, we don't scratch out of education like we've been doing consistently on all the other ones.
We should eliminate that. Yes, thank you for
Okay,
catching that.
good.
Thank
Good
you.
catch.
And then my second point, in the red, we're taking out that the CFO, Assistant Superintendent for Business Services, the very last sentence, shall administer the insurance program. And that's pretty much who is doing it, right?
Right.
So is there a reason that we're eliminating that kind of expectation of responsibility?
It is a good question. I'd have to follow up with Darren as to why it's being removed. But the district must maintain insurance, and so it's outlined.
Right.
It's the board shall purchase insurance with district funds. So really the board is the one that is issuing the insurance. It's not the CFO who's acting as that.
That's just a work duty, right?
Right. It's his job responsibility, but he's not the one who's selecting insurance per se.
Maybe you could just follow up with them, make sure that that's comfortable. We can revisit it if we have to, but at this point, we won't change it tonight.
We'll send him an email tomorrow just asking for that clarification.
Valid point. Thank you.
Finance and facility that wouldn't know what we're doing without him telling us, what he's been able to research and find. So,
Maybe he was sneaking it in there. Okay, any motion on this one? Who's up? Corey?
Try not to hog the motions, but I'll move to approve the revisions as presented to policy number 8710.
second the motion.
Seconded by Diane. Any further questions?
No.
None? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 3-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
Well, while I'm getting caught up here, next one on my paper list is 8,900 for fraud.
Yep, the fraud policy, it's been on the books since we adopted the manual. The addition to this policy, though, addresses if the superintendent is the one who is committing the fraud. All employees have an obligation to report fraud to their supervisor or directly to the superintendent or to the board president when a fraud report concerns the superintendent. And there was a local school district where fraud was occurring. The superintendent was the one who was committing the fraud, and it kind of went unchecked for a while. So this just gives a clear path from whoever knows of it right to the board president if the superintendent is the one of issue.
Questions on this one? I'm still struggling
No.
getting back up to the speed here. Policies. Okay, now we're in.
I do have one question.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It talks about like employees, contracted entity, or other individual. Would coaches, advisors, booster club, people, PTOs, are they all covered by those the way they're listed?
Booster clubs, booster clubs are not I'm sorry. PTOs are not an entity of the school district.
Right.
Right.
They're separate from the school district. I would have to look into the booster clubs. I think that there's more of a tie for the booster clubs, but I can't say that 100% certain. You could follow up with Darren, but I do know that PTOs are not an entity of the school district. They're a separate entity. They maintain their own accounts.
501c3.
We've had some issues, every couple of years, something pops up with one of our PTOs.
Just recently we've had one.
Yep.
Just the language for volunteers, that might be involved in some of those situations. Are they covered by the way this is worded?
I apologize here. So any employee, volunteer isn't an employee. Now, certainly we would encourage volunteers to come forward with that information, but the policy doesn't govern a volunteer.
Yeah. Okay. Seeing that, any motion on it?
I can make that motion to approve the recommendation, approve the revisions to policy 8900 on fraud as presented.
I'll second.
Seconded by Corey. Further questions?
No.
None? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 3-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
Okay, now, if I got back up to place on time here, we have two items in the discussion, information items, legal. First reading at the committee to move on to the committee for final approval at the next committee meeting. And that would be it. So that is 2260 English language proficiency.
Yeah, so what the change here, English learners have protection. We have an obligated to provide additional services to English learners. And we had, and you can see that there's an administrative guideline associated with the policy. So what, I guess the first step is we are proposing to eliminate the administrative guideline. And so you can see in the AG that all of the language from there is struck.
And brought over.
And then it is moved over into the policy so that it makes the administrative guideline then policy, which based off of the current interpretation of the English language rules, they recommend that all of that then be in policy for us. The other changes, for those of you who have been on the policy committee for a long time, it started out as ESL, English as a second language, then it turned into ELL, English language learners. It is now EL, so you can see changes through the policy that get us to that particular point. We assign this responsibility to our Director of Multilingual Global Education, so Dee Garcia. She's reviewed this. This fits in line with what she is doing. Talks about how we're assessing English proficiency, how we're notifying and getting consent from the parents, how we're assessing academic achievement and language proficiency, what our exit procedures are once a student reaches a level of proficiency that they no longer need the service, re-entry into the program if students do require it, making sure that we have the appropriate counseling services in place so that ELs can get the support that they need while they're in school. Again, the testing pieces.
Notice that you've got Patty Havel in there as well as a member of this contact.
Yeah, if there's any issue around impairment,
Okay.
Patty Havel would be
That's-
the point of contact to provide that assistance. So to make sure that we had an educational interpreter in place to assist with evaluation, to make sure that in some instances that we had a person who speaks the native language to perform the assessments. Patty has been
Okay,
our point
so
of contact.
it's more than just another language. It includes the other impairment. Thank you for that.
No problem.
And so but Dan?
I just have a point of clarification in the second sentence. If you go back to the beginning, I think
At the beginning?
the wording is like, with the transition, it needs to get rid of a word.
First paragraph, second sentence.
First paragraph, second sentence. With that in mind, the board shall provide appropriate identification and transition services for district students who possess our English learning. Do we need the word
Oh.
possess?
No,
Yeah, I think you strike possess.
that should be struck.
Thank you.
Just a correction there, yeah. Thank you. And the other big part is there will no longer be the guideline because it's all contained within the policy.
Correct.
Okay.
Another one with a lot of red and green, but just making it more efficient.
It's easy to migrate something from one to the next. Not get in trouble for plagiarism like that.
All right, is there a motion for approval of 2260.02 English language proficiency?
I move to
By Diane.
approve the revisions to policy 2260.02 English language proficiency as presented.
You?
I'll second.
Seconded by Corey. Further questions?
No.
This is just a discussion item, so.
I'm sorry. Oh,
This
that's
is just a
right. I'm
discussion
sorry.
item.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
That was. wait a
Strike the
minute.
motion.
strike the second.
There's no, oh, yeah, we're
That's it,
discussing it tonight and we
Right.
bring it to the committee next week. I apologize for that. So that will come, wait just a minute, I'm trying to clear the piece here. Okay, and the same is true for 5460 graduation requirements.
So getting to Mr. Montijo's point earlier this evening, a student must, so this changes may earn 25 credits. The board is saying that you must earn those 25 credits.
That
And then
opens
it
page.
adds an exception for students who, for just, ease of the discussion, who would be considered to be at risk. The board may waive graduation requirements except for core requirements. In the exceptional cases to suit the needs of a student subject to Wisconsin Administrative Code. So Waukesha, if I remember correctly, exceeds the state number of required credits to graduate by, it's either 10 or 12 credits. There's like a 13 or a 15 minimum credit level at the state level that says you must pass, I think it's like 3 units of math, 4 units of English, I think it's 3 units of social studies, 3 units of science, if my memory is serving me correctly, a half a unit of health, 2 units of Phi Ed. So there's a minimum number of requirements, and the board can't go lower than that. But for a student who's identified as at risk, for instance, of not graduating, we have some ways around that where we could eliminate some of our elective requirements here for students to graduate.
This is a discussion item, and I'm wondering, I was expecting to see all the changes in the math requirements with the discussion that's been going on at Teaching and Learning about the new math curriculum.
Those
So
haven't
that-
been approved yet, so we
Okay.
haven't made the
Right.
recommendation. I could say that the committee should anticipate seeing this policy come back
Back.
one more time this
Yeah.
year
Okay.
for that change.
I believe it's at our next committee, T&L meeting that will come up.
Yeah.
And quite simply, the word is very positive so far.
Yep. So you would see a revision to what those math courses would be.
And you probably have to grandfather the old ones and then list the new ones until everybody's through the graduation
Yep.
process that's already a junior, senior, et cetera.
We'd need to write a sunset date in there.
Yeah.
Just for some perspective, I mean, this is a very high credit threshold. Most school districts don't require upwards of 25 credits for graduation.
We are high,
So, I mean,
and it's not a bad thing. And back to the math thing, I want to make sure nobody is out there thinking that we are modifying our math program down. It's a matter of rearranging it.
Right.
And even my perspective from many years of math years ago in the old way, this is an improvement, man. I like it. Diane?
We do require a lot of credits, but I'm just thinking graduation ceremonies I've attended over the years, how many times do we have students who've gone beyond this 25 as well?
Oh, yes.
Considerably.
Considerably. We've been in the 30s and 40s, or 40.
yeah, I mean, feasibly, with an 8-period day, you get 32 credits by the time you're done.
Right.
Plus, for some of our middle school kids, I think where they can earn credit in math, in the 7th and 8th grade,
summer.
I think, or 8th grade.
Summer school?
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly exceed the 25. So you're not getting through by the skin of your teeth. We're not on a 6-period day, which would make that graduation number very problematic.
Okay, that also was a discussion item to be brought for a second reading at the committee level next meeting. Approval at that time, right, Lynn?
Correct.
And so this is, there is the legal adjustment to this one. So if we do add the math change, if it's ready at that time,
We can,
that would then follow a different approval process at that particular
Yeah.
point, because that's a recommended change. It's
Okay.
got nothing to
right,
do
we
with.
can fix two birds with one stone kind of thing, okay. Okay, discussion item, first reading at the committee to move to a board for the first reading, new policy 6147, debt management delete policy and borrowing.
Yeah, so our auditors have recommended getting rid of our borrowing policy and adding a debt management policy, which you can see here. Debt management includes borrowing and bonds and promissory notes. It's a much more comprehensive policy that meets the needs of our auditors in the auditing process. Darren and Sherry Stack spent considerable time reviewing what's been proposed, and this is what they have for us.
And at the same time, or a piece of paper might be easier to use, because we would be removing 6145.
Yeah, we'd be deleting borrowing, and you can see on the bottom of the debt management, you can see procedures for borrowing.
Yeah.
So you get the borrowing language in debt management.
And borrowing is just, as a policy, is gone.
Right, borrowing by itself is gone, but then you
All
get
moved
into.
over. Is that right?
What's that?
It's all moved over.
It's all moved over.
Yeah. Okay.
So was
Yeah.
the 6145 like looking for that temporary borrowing? Is that what's replaced now in the temporary borrowing language? Like the being able to, short-term borrowing to be able to cover payroll kind of approach to things?
So we didn't have a debt management policy prior to our discussion
Oh.
right now. So we had a borrowing policy.
Okay,
And that borrowing policy talked about anything that we were going to do, any money that we were borrowing, short-term, lines of credit and such. All of that was in the borrowing policy.
okay.
But because that is just limited to the borrowing component of it, it was recommended that we have this debt management policy that talks about bonds. You know, we've got a lot of money that we have in bonds right now as part of our construction project. It has the short-term borrowing. It has the lines of credit, so it's just all encompassing.
And, oh, go ahead, Anna.
Well, this looks like the only new thing in there is this chief financial officer in green, but really the whole policy's new.
Oh, it's a brand-new policy.
It's a new
Yeah.
policy.
So why would the CFO reference be the only thing in green?
The whole policy's,
So is that actually something that we're adding?
it says, well, if you look up on top, under G, discussion, new policy committee,
Right,
you see that it's a new policy.
right.
So we're adding policy, we're proposing to add policy 6147, debt management, to our book. And then at the same time, if the committee elects to go forward with debt management, we would then be eliminating the borrowing policy because that was folded into debt management.
Also, that was a blank line
Oh,
in the template. The new thing, we had to pick somebody.
okay, okay.
So it's required.
That's where you put chief financial officer in
So
there.
you know who we chose as an
Yeah,
administration.
that was an option we had to put in there.
Okay, thank you. There was just a clarification.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
That's
Yeah, no,
perfect.
I'm just wondering why that was the only thing in green, because the whole thing is brand new, so,
Yeah, but that part was brought over.
Yeah.
Without that word in it, so, okay. And that will be read again. No, we'll be reading that, first reading will be at the committee level, and then to the board level after another reading.
Yeah, so we would go November policy, December board, December policy, January board
For
for
approval, yeah. That's one of the previous way we did stuff. Okay. All right. We still have a open discussion on 3122.01 and 4122.01 about the drug-free workplace.
I guess the question that I would have, given that we've, our historical discussion on it was there's some concern around off-work conduct, that was part of it. And then there was some concern around, like medical marijuana, for instance, being, in somebody's system or whatever it might be. Can we govern what people are doing off work? And can we, what would we do for situations where somebody was using marijuana in a medical sense, knowing that marijuana is legal down in Illinois? but not here, recreational even, marijuana. You know, Wisconsin has its rules, its drug-free workplace rules. You know, it's not legal in Wisconsin, and that's what governs us. Even if you're in Illinois using it, it's still, if it's in your system, you're in violation of this policy. I can say that we can operate as a district without this language in there. If the board would so choose, we can reject this change. You know, for both professional and support staff, we can go forward and try to figure out what that language is. I mean, this is the recommended language, and just for some perspective for the board, I mean, Neola puts language together, they take it through their attorneys. It's based off of the experience of, I think, 1,400 school districts around the country. And then they come to you locally and say, do you want to accept this language, or do you not want to accept this language? And ultimately, the committee can make that call if we want to go forward with it. And if there's no interest to go forward with it, we can, you know, we don't have to build it in right now. And we can wait for further guidance, for instance, from our own legal counsel or from a change in the Wisconsin law. And if there's a change in the Wisconsin law, then it becomes a legally based policy that we should certainly make changes to.
So, I guess opinion, excuse me, opinions you might have? Anybody? Get back, Corey. Excuse me.
Yeah, first of all, thank you to the committee and Dr. Cook. This came up a number of months ago. It was set to come up at a meeting where I was excused from, and I watched the meeting and you bumped it, so thank you. There was some discussion about whether this is obligatory under the Drug-Free Work Act. I think everybody investigated that, the administration and myself found out it's not obligatory. And then I actually called Neola to try to get some clarification. They didn't call me back. This was a couple months ago. Regarding off-work conduct, the intent, the purpose, I get it, I understand it. But to draft a policy for off-work conduct that is narrow enough and enforceable and a number of different things is very, very difficult. If I look at this, I know Neola drafted it. It is just filled with holes.
What?
Filled with holes. I mean, it says disciplinary action may result, and then at the end it says if the administration becomes aware, it will investigate. So whether it has grounds that its conduct, I mean, it just makes the administration investigate any of these things that could possibly be related to it. And it also is a standard that says circumstances of the off-work conduct create a connection or nexus with their role. What else is it? Public media in a fashion that tends to provoke public scrutiny, damage the staff member's credibility. Those are, try to define those, enforce those, I think are just impossible. Plus, just my general concern of trying to govern staff members and employees off-work conduct. How I look at it is, I'm trying to think of an example that's not inappropriate. The Supreme Court's dealt with this issue on certain publications that morally people find offensive, and the justice said, you know it when you see it. We can't really do that, but I think this is just way too broad, way too vague, and again, Neola drafted it.
Just to give the committee some perspective too, if I may, I mean, we run into situations where there was images of conduct that would be considered to be against the law. That conduct is referred over to law enforcement. And then if the person is investigated and ultimately charged and they didn't notify us as a school, this is in the employee handbook, they have to notify us of any arrest, drunk driving, drug possession, whatever it might be. If they don't notify HR that happened, then we have the ability to discipline. Mm-hmm. So if it's criminal in nature, now, there have been situations where school boards and school districts have had to deal with unsavory off-work conduct by employees, and that lends itself to a level of public scrutiny for the governing body, because, the question comes down to, how can you let somebody who did this in their free time continue to work for you? I mean, that's you see that scenario play out occasionally, around our country. So,
right. I'm sorry.
So, I mean, I just, I'm not advocating that we have this in policy. It's just a matter of, these are some of the issues that we face from the arrest standpoint, which, we have the ability to address that. More from the public scrutiny, that then comes down into, the staff member who engages in behavior that's found on social media that then calls into question their credibility as an educator. They will come to administration and they'll come to the board and they could make a public issue for the district. And absent the ability to discipline them for that, then, then you're saying that it's their free time and they're able to do, as long as it's not criminal, they're able to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
So we have situations where it might be an objective thing rather than a subjective thing, and you're trying to figure out how to deal with it.
Sure. And we can deal with those things without this language. I'm not saying that we need this language.
But would you have the authority to actually take action without this language? I mean,
Depends on the scope of what happened, certainly. If it borders on the line of criminal, we would have the ability.
Yeah, but
if the person didn't notify us, right? I mean, we can't judge somebody based off their criminal record, but if it was a moral conduct that would result in the revocation of a license, we have the ability to discipline pending investigation, or not discipline, but suspend pending investigation. So we have things that we can do.
okay. Corey?
What I do as part of my day-to-day job is when things like this are, viewed as potentially overly broad, then I say, well, the alternative is list all the conduct that would be in violation. It's impossible. There's probably thousands. So then you do the opposite and say what is permitted. We can't do that either. But if I just look at the first sentence, it says disciplinary action may result from conduct related to drug and alcohol use. I would say, to draw the example, is there are a public push to deal with the issue Dr. Cook mentioned before about legalization of marijuana. There could be a teacher off campus, unrelated to work, who is advocating, testifying in front of the legislature, wearing the normal shirts. I think it's normal. I think back to high school days, where they're pushing for legalization of marijuana, in fact, pushing for legalization of all recreational drugs. And that would obligate the administration to investigate, because it is conduct related to drug and alcohol use. So I get it, but if we can accomplish this through the other means, dealing with illegal activity, I forgot the other one that you mentioned.
Things that would be immoral that would result in the revocation of a educator's license.
Right, and I think that's kind of what we're doing. I just think it's unnecessarily overly broad. The intent is fine. But
We first started talking about this, I think, back in March, April, May, something like that. So we've certainly made it this far without it. And there could be unique circumstances that our district faces that, would even fit outside of this. So I'm not advocating that we keep it on. We could certainly go without it, but we wanted to bring some finality to it. So, the committee can make a recommendation to just reject this and not bring it back, and we can reject it and not bring it back.
So that
That's
would
fine.
be the entire paragraph under off-work conduct?
Correct. Anything that you see underlined in green. We currently have drug-free workplace. It's everything that's in black. We just wouldn't build in the stuff that's in green.
Oh, all the green, all the way up on top here.
Yeah.
Okay, you saw,
I
okay.
think the only recommended change based off of, I think what the committee would, if I could summarize what the committee would be comfortable, is us just eliminating of education. The thing that I would advocate for, though, if we could, is the sentence that says each individual staff member is responsible for the substances they put in their body. I would not want us to say that you are not responsible, that you ate a brownie, and the brownie was a marijuana brownie, it was an edible, and you said, "Oops, I'm sorry, I didn't know that it was an edible."
I saw that paragraph, sentence before, but now I can't find it.
End of the first paragraph.
First paragraph, last sentence. This is standard language.
Oh, way up
from
on top.
Yep, first
This
paragraph.
is standard
There it
language
is,
from any
yeah.
professional athletic association where if you fail a drug test, you fail a drug test.
Diane?
Just my question, could we approve it as amended without the paragraph under the subheading off-work conduct? To get in the handbook summary and some of these other kinds of ideas in that sentence that you're talking about? Since the only thing that we're really discussing and questioning is the off-work conduct context.
I don't think we've agendized this as an approval item tonight.
No, it's
It was
just.
just discussion again.
Yeah, it's just.
And I'm just wondering if that's something we could do.
Sure, we can come back in December with this policy, just kind of scratched out with the components of it, the nebulous components of it are taken out. That,
Okay.
So I think there's a lot of good stuff that we would like to still have.
right, I mean, the black is already in policy.
Right.
We already have that on the books. It's just the green underlined stuff is the new. And that, I think, is some of the stuff, if I understand it, the off-work conduct piece is what, is a bit questionable. But we already have everything in black on the books.
So the question is, do we even have to take it up? If we erase everything, but we're going to leave something in there, though.
Well, I guess from an administrative
Yeah.
standpoint, just for the ease of administrating a drug-free
Yes.
workplace policy, it makes it easier for us to say each individual staff member is responsible
Yes.
for what they put in.
That's fine.
And we can come back with that for action next month.
Corey?
I'm sorry, thank you. I'm fine with it as presented, but striking the off-work conduct section.
Just that bottom part?
Yes, sir.
We can next month come to you with it drafted as such, and then you can take action as a committee.
Okay.
Categories go into when it comes back now
It
after.
would be a recommended revision, so it would
Recommended
be a
revision.
reading at the committee and then a full reading at the board.
Yeah.
Because this already went to the board once, right? I
Yep.
think.
Yep, it's been tossed around like a baseball.
Yeah.
Came back to
To,
committee.
to look at this
That may have
language.
been that spring.
Yeah.
No one will remember.
It's like a new thing.
Okay. So we will be doing that at our December meeting. That would bring us to the bottom of our list, other than recommendation for anything you wanted in a future meeting.
We're just going to continue to bring up
We
more policy revisions.
We
to
have a
you.
bunch out there, right?
Yep.
And some of it is being reviewed by our administrators.
All in
The
administration's hands right now.
Yeah, okay.
After our review with Neola.
Okay,
I have no recommendations.
okay, okay.
I'm fine.
All right, I don't have it in front of me. What's our date, Lynn?
December 16th.
16th of December?
What's your best guess? How many will we have?
15th of December, my apologies.
How many?
How many policies?
I think we're working on about 40. Many of them are pretty minor revisions like what you saw tonight. Nothing's too huge in there.
Okay, December 15th is our next committee meeting, and with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.